Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of We Need to Talk. I'm your host, Malynda, and I'm joined by my co-host, Karmel.
Bonjour.
Oh, we're going French today. Are we okay? In studio today, we're so excited to have stand-up comedian and writer Raja Michael.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for coming, hailing all the way from the East Coast, New York.
Yeah.
How do you like LA?
I love LA. It's home. I've been here for 7 or 8 years.
Oh, so this is home now.
Yeah,
Do you go back to
definitely.
East Coast often?
Now and then, as long as it's not winter and it's not snowing.
Girl, tell me about it. I lived in New York for a few years, so
Oh,
I
so
know.
you know.
And then I moved to Chicago, which is
Oh, my
worse cold than
God.
New York.
Oh my god.
Chicago's like disrespectful cold.
Mm.
So I know all about
I
that.
haven't been to either yet.
You have, what?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you need to get out,
Oh,
Carmel.
yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
You really
Yeah,
need to
you
get
do.
out.
I do.
Go to Chicago first, because then New York will seem warm.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
But get to New York fast because it's just changing so fast.
It
Really?
is, yeah.
Yeah,
I
before
agree
it's
with that.
completely gentrified.
Yeah, 'cause
Right.
they're like, because Harlem's starting to lose a little history, I feel like.
A lot. It's
Really?
different.
Yeah,
It's
I hear
different.
that.
I grew up in Brooklyn, and it's like, no more Astroland Park. It kind of feels like a
Oh,
knife in the
man,
heart.
Yeah,
It's tough.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's
tough.
changing.
It's really weird because people always, like, when they find out I grew up in Brooklyn, they'll be like, "Oh, I lived in Brooklyn," like, to relate to me, like, and I worked at this like artisanal coffee shop for 3 weeks. I'm like, listen, like,
That's not Brooklyn.
Yeah.
gentrifying in is not the same as being gentrified
Right.
out. You know what I mean?
Right.
We don't relate.
Oh my gosh. Well, we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So a lot has been going on the last couple weeks. I just was on Twitter before we even started doing this episode, and I was like, I'm not even going to touch what Donald Trump just tweeted. But there's one thing I really do want to talk about that I think not enough people are talking about. In the last year or so, of course, we've had, Time's Up and Me Too movement happen, and we've had a lot of these well-known people, high-profile people, these cases happen where they're being accused of and proven to have been involved in sex trafficking or sexual harassment, sexual assault in some way. But what I really want to focus on is kind of accountability of the people around them and how they've enabled them to even get to this point. Because a lot of these people that we've heard about, Bill Cosby, Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein, R. Kelly, all these people, it's been a known thing
For a while.
You
for a
feel
long
For a while.
time.
open
Yeah.
secrets.
And so I'm always so confused when it finally gets to the point where, legal action is being taken. Why, and not the women, because I understand the victims that don't want to come forward. I get why it's hard, but I don't understand these people, these friends, these other people that don't come forward and say something.
Well, I think a lot of it is these people are in positions of power, and almost similar to their victim, there are people who are tangential to them are in fear. And so they're like, oh, well, this is my career. This is my livelihood. This is this. I'll just look the other way. And you get numb after a while, 10, 15, 20 years of just seeing it. And then you're like, well, they're not saying anything either. And they're not saying anything either. Why am I going to be the one to jack up this quote unquote good thing? And then after a while, someone finally comes out and you're like, you knew. And you're like, oh, I did.
Yeah.
But then you had other priorities, and it wasn't their livelihood or their well-being, it was yours.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, like most people who hide it, they have money to lose. I've seen that, or career status, someone to, their resumes get hurt by it. But also, I think a lot of men who know, and I know it's not just men who abuse, and I know it's not just men who cover up, but I do see that a lot of the men who know, a lot of times they don't speak up because I feel like they're afraid to be mocked by other men for being like the whistleblower, the guy who like kind of told on his boy or whatever, especially because it's rarely proven. It's hard. It's a hard crime to prove. So a lot of times it's your word against somebody else's. And it's a lot of like that straight cis male culture where you're not allowed to tell on your other men, or it makes you soft or weak, or like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you see how bad men treat women, and their friends know, and their friends feel bad, and they don't tell that girl she's getting played.
Right.
You think like, you've known her for 15 years. How do you
Right.
not tell her? But there's this like bizarre loyalty in toxic male culture.
For sure. And there's not enough protection, I realize, because even like you saying, like, this guy could have known this girl for 15 years, but he's still going to protect the guy, even though that could have been like his little sister.
Yeah, some guy he met like 3 times at
Right,
a bachelor party,
right.
and like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, what are you
Right.
defending this dude
For
for?
sure. It's never made sense to me. And so, especially even with these high profile cases, like this recent case with Epstein, that just made me sick to my stomach. And there's so
disgusting.
many. We were talking about this even before we started recording, just how many connections there are politically with this guy. And if you want to wrap on that a little bit, what you were talking about before.
Yeah, I was saying, like, we all know that he's connected with Donald Trump, but he's also very connected to Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton, these rumors about him being involved in these, like, sex trafficking circles have been around for, like, 15, 20 years. There's numerous women who spoke up about him being a rapist and have assaulted him. And you see a lot of, like, even a lot, like, Democrats were like, oh, Trump was involved. And like, all the Democrats want everyone to know, take down Trump, he's involved. But they keep not mentioning Bill Clinton. And it's like, just because he's your guy doesn't mean you could ignore it. I mean,
Right.
he's been the same people like hashtagging believe women don't believe it if it's Clinton's victims, and it's like, it's this bizarre thing that if you like, I feel like it's easy to talk and it's easy to say you're an advocate until you have something to lose.
Right.
And everyone changes when they have something to lose, even if it means like political party not,
Right.
winning. And a lot of Hillary Clinton's like hardcore supporters in the last election used to frustrate me because they would say, we don't want Trump to win because we don't want a rapist in the White House. I agree. I don't want a rapist in the White House either. But if Hillary wins and her husband's living in the White House, we still have a rapist in the White House. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
we need to produce better candidates rather than just
Yeah.
covering up.
Yeah.
But even, like it's the so-called liberals and progressives are also as much part of this rape culture, defending it and protecting it when it suits our interests.
Absolutely.
And see, this is why I always harp on politics, because it doesn't matter. I don't care if you're red or blue. If someone's getting raped, someone's getting abused, someone's being taken advantage of, does it matter what party you're part of? Like, why are we still defending someone just because, oh, that's a Democrat or they're like, I do not care.
Right.
It
right.
means nothing to me. If someone is affiliated to me in some connection, whether it's career friendly, just someone, an acquaintance from someone else, you do something wrong, I don't know you anymore.
Right.
I
right.
do not care. I hate seeing people still hold on to something that's so like means nothing compared to someone's livelihood, someone's well-being, someone's health. But we work on the same floor, or we came in together. We're in the Army, we're in the Navy, we're the police.
Or family member.
Right, family member. I don't care. Anyone that I know that's close to me that does something, you're not family to me anymore.
Right,
Like I
right.
just don't get holding on to that, and it's something that's not even on that layer. It's like the most like shallow stuff that they're still holding on to, yet they're hurting someone and multiple people. I don't get that.
I just don't get the allegiance towards party. Like, like I don't get it. And it's supposed to be for the people, but nobody actually ever ends up caring about the people. It's literally just this label of party. Like, we're Republicans, so whoever is a Republican, we're going to vote for Republican and be for the Republican and yada, yada, yada. And same with Democrats. I've just never understood that. And I think we talked about this before on another episode. But like in Canada, for example, they have like 9 or 10 parties and a bunch of candidates, but everybody just focuses on what the candidate has to say. And if they're for the person. This division of just, it's always one or the other. We talked about choices and stuff. It makes no sense to me that it's like, this is just what we have to choose
Right.
from.
America's one of the few U.S. is one of the few places where we just have 2 parties, which we don't. Actually, we do have more, but we're only allowed to know that we have 2 parties.
Right.
Right.
I like
And
how you put
that's
that.
it.
Allowed to know.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a very good way to put it, because there's the independent, isn't there the Libertarian Party? There's the
Libertarian,
independent
Green
Green Independents.
Party.
Yeah, and I just wish that they were given the same amount of platform and TV time and credit and interviews so that we could actually make choices like this is supposed to be a democracy.
But let's say if someone actually, and this is probably a good question for Drexel, shout out to Drexel. What if someone from those other parties were actually voted in, and you have a Senate and Congress that are based on 2 political parties, and the person in the White House is not of either party? What happens then?
I mean,
That's a good question.
there'll be a lot of gridlock, but that's also what happens when there's 2 parties. Like what happened to Obama, right? When he had he had to deal with all these Republicans, and he was a Democrat in the White House. So I think that it will create gridlock, but that gridlock is still unavoidable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think it's a reason to shy away from it.
Oh no, I'm all for it.
And
I
it's
like
also
chaos.
more likely to get independence into local level politics, state politics anyway. So I
True,
think
true.
once we start opening up those doors, we'll see a lot of people in Congress and Senate and other seats that are not part, either party.
And people will realize that there are other parties.
Right.
I guarantee
Yes.
there are so many people that don't even know.
And if we want to, like, especially as non-white people in America, as people of color, just like our loyalty to Democrats is so funny because if you want to know how Democrats feel about people of color, just listen to Nancy Pelosi talking about our freshman class. You know what I mean? And listen to all the white women who are still defending her and calling her a hero.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in hearing her talk about, women had the right to vote in 1920. It's like, no, white women. Just say that. It's white women. Black women, other women of color, they did not have the rights that you had. So until they're able to really have those conversations, you're very, very correct in saying that. But going back a little bit to what we were talking about with accountability with, sexual trafficking and sexual assault and all that, do you think because of these people in high profile, money talks so much to get them out of these situations?
Sure. Easy.
Think of this young man who's a rapist. What was his name? He recently, very recent case where he was a young white man. He recorded himself raping this young girl.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Shared that video
with his friends.
His friends, and in the video called himself a rapist.
Yeah, he was. I think the line that he texted, and he was like, "When your first time having sex is getting raped."
Yeah, and then the judge let him go because he was from a good family,
and he didn't want to ruin his education.
Wait a minute. Which case was this?
Oh, I'm surprised I didn't send this to you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was livid. But there was a lot going on also during that week, so I was like, I can't even deal with this. Oh, yeah, I got to send this to you. It's very, very recent. And then it just made me think about the Albert Wilson case. Did you hear about that case?
No, I didn't.
So this young boy from KU, Kansas University, and University of Kansas, whatever you want to call it. But he met a young white lady from the same university at a party. They went back to her apartment, made out, hooked up or whatever, but they didn't have sex at all. 15 minutes later, I guess they went, it literally was that short. They went back to the party. Next thing he knows, he's getting accused of rape. And now he was sentenced to 12 years in jail for never even having intercourse with her.
What was their justification of doing this?
That's what we're all still trying to find out. Yeah. And when you read the court reports and you read the information that there was no body fluids found inside of her, there was no semen, no nothing like that.
Is she accusing him of rape?
100%. It's
and
the story is harrowing.
Tons of video evidence showing them walking literally across the street. 12, 15 minutes later, they come back across. Her demeanor's fine. Nothing looks out of the ordinary at all.
It makes no sense. I wish I could make that. That remind me so much so closely.
How do I Google this? What was the name?
Albert Wilson. Just type in Albert Wilson rape case, and it's going to make you sick to your stomach.
Wow.
And it reminded me so much of the Central Park 5 story. It's very similar to that because they had no evidence to convict these boys. And they ended up serving, 5 to 14 years in jail for something that they had no evidence on.
None.
I feel like with our society, we don't mourn what the victims lose because they're not, because you notice we never talk about the victims. The story's never centered around the victims. It's centered around the perpetrator. Like in this case where the judge said he's from a good family, we're still talking about him and not her. You know, and that's the number one problem. Like not the number one problem. One of the main problems is the story is always the narrative is centered around the perpetrator, not the victim.
Yep, always.
And then also we have sympathy for people that in our brainwashed, white supremacist, capitalist mindset, we feel can contribute to society one day. It's not even about that person; it's what productivity they think they can offer, or in other words, how much money they can make, and how much money they could bring to the 1% of our society. Yeah. So it's like if you can contribute to our unregulated capitalism, you get to rape.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Wow. And it's the more you can.
Wow.
And whatever feature you have, if you're light skinned, you're less likely not to get convicted than if you're darker skinned, right? Because
absolutely.
In our patriarchy, we see light skin as making more money. Even though it's not true, we see it that way. Yeah. So it's like how whoever could bring more money to our system gets to do what they want. We feel sorry for them.
Right.
Because one day they can be productive.
For sure. And people of color, there's this fake narrative that we're aggressive, that we're mean, that we're we are strong as a people, but they have this vision of us that we're to be feared. When if you look at history, hello, come on somebody, if you look at history, who have been the biggest perpetrators?
It's not even close. It's funny. It's not even close.
It blows my mind that people in power have been able to make people believe that all people of color are just bad.
I mean, I just had this conversation with someone the other day, and they were talking about, terrorists and, people bombing people. And I'm like, or just being like generally just aggressive. I'm like, what person has actually accosted you? Like literally to your face and to your personage. One time I got into it with this redneck. Like, there you go. not an Arab, not a Muslim,
Right.
not another black person.
Right. Right.
The person you're talking about is the person who's controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
The literal media that's pumping all these ideas that the person you think is aggressive is that person.
Yeah.
It's a white male.
Yeah.
I'm like, why aren't you mad at them? Oh, well, they're just stupid. I get that they're stupid, but I'm saying is you have this idea that it's me or it's my Syrian buddy.
But just saying, oh, they're stupid. It's like, oh, when they do it, it's okay. It's
okay,
excused.
right.
There's a label and excuse
For sure.
on it.
Right.
For sure.
And even if you think of the things that we think people could be dangerous about, what if they steal your wallet? What's the big deal? Honestly, you get another license and you redo your credit cards. That's somebody who's stealing because of poverty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, okay,
Yeah,
you got
yeah.
$5. Good. I hope you use that $5 for something
To
you
do
need.
something good. Yeah.
I'll get a new license.
Yeah,
It's not.
yeah.
I mean, it sucks and it's inconvenient, but it's not really the end of the world.
Right.
Whereas, like, the crimes that really take our life from us, it's like that person's a CEO, they're a business person, and then we want to write these big biographies for Steve Jobs and act like they're a big deal, and they're the ones doing things that really hurt our
Right.
lives in the long run.
Absolutely.
But-
And it's funny that you said that when you ask somebody, have you ever been assaulted by anybody? Nobody that has these really strong opinions about people of color, I feel, even know people of color.
Oh, no.
Or have had
Yeah.
any, conversations or interactions with them whatsoever. It's all what they've seen, and now they're just led to believe it.
Though, I do think the few people who have really racist views who have been really close to people of color are like underachievers for blaming the people of color around them for getting things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The few times I see that they
Yeah.
actually know people of color,
Yeah.
it's like they're just not adequate in many ways.
Right.
And they can't accept that maybe their parents didn't teach them life skills, or maybe their schools weren't good enough, or maybe they're not working as hard as their Black or Latino coworkers. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
Like,
No, for
and
sure.
then they blame them. So that's the only time where I see people have really intimate interactions with people of color who still see people of color as the problem, is when they don't want to take blame for their own shortcomings.
Right.
you know?
Well, they've also been taught that being white, they should be able to get whatever they want. Be it a job or be it a shorter sentence for doing something that a black person did. That's just what we've been taught in society.
Or
is
in
that-
this case, literally running a sex trafficking ring. Like, literally. Right. And the thing with that ring is that it's been known, it's been public information for like over 15 years.
Totally. Same with R. Kelly too. Yeah.
yeah.
But that shows with him like profound celebrity. Because if he were just any run of the mill black guy, this would have been done.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
And you realize that he's only getting consequences once he stopped having a lot of money.
Yeah. That's very true.
Yeah.
Once his assets ran out.
That's
Yeah,
very
see,
true.
his case is really interesting to me because it's all his fault, and I get that. I want to make that very clear. But I'm saying a lot of people in the industry know that these parents are bringing their daughters to him to make them stars. And to your point, when he could possibly do that, no one was saying anything. And as soon as his celebrity status starts dipping a little bit, no one knows who R. Kelly is. Oh, you didn't do what you said.
Yeah.
I'm gonna extort you for some money.
Yeah.
So there's that situation to me is not the same as some of these where people are just completely demonic, like stuff that Jeffrey Epstein did. These things are like completely just heinous. Like you're completely using your power to completely overpower someone.
Yeah.
Whereas in R. Kelly's case, yes, again, it was wrong what he did, but someone's bringing you and trying to get you to do this for that, and it's what these parents have done, and no one's bringing that up either. What these parents do because people aren't talking about.
Well,
that
that goes back to
The parents are
accountability for them.
responsibility. I mean, I think he's 100% responsible for everything
100%.
he did, but the parents are also responsible for their actions,
Yes.
for
For
not
sure.
protecting their
Yes.
children.
For sure. And that, like I said, that goes back to accountability as well. It's like, come on, you're supposed to be taking care of your child.
Right.
But also, how many people has R. Kelly discovered? Like, why would he be your choice person
Nobody,
to help?
zero.
Like, I said this before. It's like, I mean, I would go to Usher before R. Kelly because at
I
least he helped with
know.
Justin Bieber.
Right.
Like, who
Right.
has R. Kelly's, who career has R. Kelly broken? That's what I
Zero.
never understood. It made no sense. He's not even on the list of people that I would be like, hey, maybe,
Yeah, Jermaine Dupri.
I could list at least 15 people right now, and R. Kelly would
50
not be
Cent.
even
Did
on
he-
the
did he
50
make
Cent even.
Yeah.
Like, for real.
Yeah, I mean, he has a successful show. Like, he's
Yeah.
creating
You got a
opportunities.
couple,
for
yeah.
Right.
But yeah.
It's very interesting because he was not on my. I always thought that was the funny part.
Well, it's people are so thirsty for opportunity.
Yeah, they are for sure.
People are so thirsty. And it's very sad when it's the parents who have more desire for that than the kids.
Right.
Absolutely. And one of the things, and I had mentioned this to Carmel earlier, that I always find interesting in these cases of people that have like consistent cases of sexual assault, everybody always chalks this up to mental illness. And for me,
It's not.
I can't get on board with that because to me, I'm like, some people are just really bad people. They're just bad people. And I'm curious your thoughts about that because I just don't, I can't go immediately to the mental illness excuse. I can't.
Well, I would say like I have depression and anxiety, and I have post traumatic stress, complex post traumatic stress disorder. I'm mentally ill, and so no, I don't see how that is the reason. People could be pedophiles and they could be evil and mentally ill, right? They could all work together. But no, you're not going to molest a child or rape somebody because you're mentally ill. That's ridiculous. I think we say that because we're trying to understand something that makes no sense whatsoever.
Right. Yeah.
And then also we want to like instill like our stars. Like Michael Jackson is a really touchy subject that people don't want to talk about. One is that he's not here to defend himself.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main reason, because if you remember before he passed away, like Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle were joking about that he was a pedophile. No one got offended. But once he passed away, people want to remember him a certain way, and now people are getting offended. We used to be allowed to talk about this,
Right.
But like you want to say he was mentally ill, make an excuse for him so you could still enjoy the beautiful art that he made, because like there's no other artist like Michael Jackson. There never will be.
Yeah.
And I think the other part of it is that the victims are children, and nobody cares what happens to children. But I think people say that because it's like we're trying to understand something, and because the media, we see mentally ill people differently than what the reality is. So the media, you have like Michael Myers who was in a child mental institution. So like we have this whole, we don't know what mental illness is. So we think mental illness is like this really exotic, weird thing that makes people act a certain, you know what I mean? Like there's this mystique around it. So because we have such a lack of education on what mental illness is, it's easy to blame everything on it, you know? But like, no, I think, it's not, mental illness will do a lot to you, but it's not going to suddenly turn you into, I mean, pedophilia is a mental disorder.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I understand, but not everyone who has that disorder acts on it. Because if you have empathy, you won't.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's more, I think it's more an issue of whether or not you have empathy as a human being.
And see, what's really also bothering me about this, and is part of the reason why there hasn't been change, is this is so deeply enrooted in our culture. I mean, it's been around forever. I mean, we're talking about, R. Kelly, Michael Jackson. Well, Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh, that's true.
The Catholic Church. I mean,
The Catholic
I mean,
Church.
come on,
right.
come on.
This has been going on for so long. So it's like, something today happening, those same people came out of those same kind of either cultures or backgrounds, and like this is kind of, the thing you do. And then when you have money and power on top of that, you can do it at a different level and a different scale. And then,
wasn't Jerry Seinfeld dating 17-year-old? Like
yeah, I believe it was.
Probably. I mean, nothing's really surprises me anymore at all. But I want to talk about the church a little bit. Because I was having this conversation with my husband, and he said something that just clicked on why this happens so much. And I didn't realize it until he said this, but obviously we've known priests, have molested little boys, and it's been a common thing that's happened in the Catholic Church. But he was saying that the reason it happens so much is because a lot of those priests are probably gay, and because they're shunned and not allowed to be who they are, and that's why they're not allowed to marry, because they're gay, and that's why they take this vow, but then they are acting on their feelings because that's who they're around. That might be why. So if the church was a little bit more open with their LGBT stance, this may happen less. And I think it's an interesting point, and I didn't actually think of it that way. Because I was just like, these are just sick old men.
Right.
But like, maybe they're actually...
But they're children, right? So being gay is not going to make you attracted to a
True.
child.
But I'm saying if they're only around boys and then themselves as the priest, let's say you have a class and it's just a class of boys and you're priest and you're naturally attracted to males, like that's all you're around. Yes, I get children, but I kind of understand what he's saying. I do think it's an interesting point.
It's also opportunity, and the child is very subservient to the man, available. So I
And
kinda
vulnerable.
understand. Vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I get that.
For me, a lot of it, I see it as power, because if you think about it, what kind of person wants to become a priest or a pastor? You know, some people, I do think they do it because they feel called, but I also think that it's a position of power. And you see a lot of, I didn't grow up in the Catholic Church, but I grew up in the evangelical church, and I feel like a lot of evangelical pastors are megalomaniacs, and they like to, if you really pay, like my pastor growing up, and Malynda knows a lot about my story. Like, so in my church that I grew up in, I was like a couple of us. We were victims of a pedophile in our church. And we told the pastor, and he covered it up. And he convinced us that it was our job as Christians to forgive. So we did, And by the time I was old enough to understand that this is all bullshit, the crimes happened in New York. I was in Jersey by the time I spoke up about it. The statutes of limitations were up. So none of us were able to, who knew that we were victims, were able to. And so this pastor, he covered it up. He did like what you call an quote unquote inside healing. And as I got older, because he was a great preacher and everyone loved him. And as I got older and I started thinking about him more, I was like, he was a great preacher, but he had no substance and he had nothing to offer. And why do people like this want to lead churches? And I'm like, oh, who else would care about him anywhere else? So I think there is a thing of people with certain narcissistic tendencies or like wanting to be in charge or wanting to be powerful, enjoying power, go into church leadership roles. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think there is a aspect of enjoying having power over someone weaker than you that draws you to certain leadership. Because you see it everywhere. Like sometimes in like,
even politicians.
And even in really progressive radical movements, you see the leaders can be really dangerous men a lot of times, because they enjoy that position of power.
Yeah.
And you could have a church that maybe is feeding a lot of homeless people and doing all these nice things, and you don't want to ruin that for everybody.
Right.
I worked in domestic violence for a long time, and something we know about the domestic violence world is there's a lot of workers who are really abusive to the clients. And it's like, they're here to escape domestic violence.
Right, they don't need to get it from you.
But we're there because now we have a position of power over these clients. They're running from their home. They're homeless. They're weak, and you have so much power over their life.
Yeah.
So I think like people who've been disempowered in their lives, and it could be because like what your husband said, maybe they were disempowered because they were gay, or maybe they were disempowered for other things. There could be so many different reasons.
For sure.
They need to have that. I think often need to have that position of power somewhere, because if you think about this pastor of mine, like he had so much power over us. We all gave up all of our agency.
I'm surprised there's a statute of limitations on that.
In New York, 7 years.
Really?
Oh, New York is one of the most backwards places in the world when it comes to sexual. Like very recently, it stopped being illegal. Like before, if a woman this changed very recently, in less than a few months ago, where like before a few months ago, if you were being raped and you stabbed a man while he was raping you, you still had to go to jail for 7 years for murder. This just changed in New York.
Are you
New York
kidding?
is one of the most backwards places in the world. Because we always think New York City. Remember, New York State is a different story.
That is true.
New York State is one of the most backward in the world, not in America, in the world, when it comes to rights for rape victims and child sexual assault victims. Jersey doesn't have a statute of limitation. And I think that might have changed in New York by now, but at that time it was 7 years.
I had no idea.
That's
ridiculous.
That's crazy.
America has really backwards laws. What America has is a lot of white feminists who create an image of how progressive our laws are about sexual assault and rape, but they're actually not really different than any other place in the world that we criticize. But and New York is one of the worst places. There's southern states that have much more progressive laws when it comes to rape and sexual assault in New York.
That's so shocking to me.
Wow.
But I think, you kind of hit the nail on the head when it's like New York City is different from the state. I think we forget and think about all these metropolitan cities, but it doesn't represent the state that it's actually
Remember, in LA, we're still in the same state as Bakersfield or
Orange County.
Orange County. I mean, I don't want to knock Bakersfield because I know that it's a economically struggling area.
Right.
But there's a lot of Trump supporters out there.
Same with Orange County, but like you think of Las Vegas, you're like, oh, it's fun, but it's still in Nevada. Like there's Phoenix
Illinois. I mean, Chicago is still in the Midwest. It's in Illinois.
Exactly. But yeah, I lived in Chicago for a while, so I was only around like Obama supporters because my husband went to University of Chicago. Everybody loves Obama. But when you go outside, you go up to like Naperville and you go up north. Oh my goodness, it's shocking.
And another thing I wanted to even say about the pastor, like they covered it up. The reason why is to not lose the tithes for the church. Something like this, a scandal like this breaks out in the church, everyone loses money.
Yeah.
And and he was a white pastor in a quote unquote diverse church, meaning we're all diverse and didn't know we were being oppressed by our white pastor. And and white pastors often like a lot of like my family is from South Asia, and South Asian pastors usually have their own jobs. But most white American pastors don't have their own incomes. They survive on the tithes from the church. So now he's in a position to oppress all of us to make sure there's food on the table for his kids.
Speak on it.
Right. But the problem with that is that the victims are always blamed. And
we didn't forgive. We were bad Christians for not forgiving.
Wow. And if you were to speak up, if you were to bring down the church, quote unquote, it would be your fault because you were doing what was right. You were speaking up against this person that wronged you. And we've seen that happen in the entertainment industry often. And it happened in a recent situation that we were talking about with Lena Waite's show, The Chai.
Well, Lena Waithe, she did a lot of really great work, right, for the Time's Up movement, and but recently, the Tiffany Boone, who was an actor on the show, she has been very vocal within the show that her co-star Jason Mitchell was harassing her on the show, and he's an up and coming star. He's a great, talented actor, right, and he's beloved and he's a big deal, and so this was going on for a few seasons until she's the one who ended up losing her job on the show. And
Which how backwards is that?
Lena Waithe is a Time's Up activist.
Yeah.
So it was really, and then, so anyway, because he's a great actor and Netflix loves working with up and comers, Netflix put him on a bunch of movies for them, and then he started harassing white women. And as soon as these white women stepped forward that he was harassing them, he got fired immediately off of Netflix. And then it came back to The Chi, where now all of a sudden, because he got fired from these shows on Netflix, he got fired off of that show. It wasn't because a black woman was speaking up about him harassing her. It was because I'm glad they spoke up. Nobody deserves to be harassed, but Netflix was protected their own, and then it came back to him. And I don't know if Lena Waithe was explaining it on The Breakfast Club. She went on The Breakfast Club to try, which is interesting because the show also run by rapists and trying to explain, trying to explain her reasoning, and she was just talking in circles. And I like her work. I think she does amazing work. I think her presence is incredibly important. It's not that I'm trying to criticizing someone is not the same thing as canceling them. I just want to put that out there. No. I know people.
Amen. But, I love that. I love that.
But as soon as it's easy to talk, but we all change when it affects us. Yeah, you know what I mean? When you have something to lose, it becomes a different story.
Absolutely, because we're focused on our livelihood, our family, how we're going to put food
not
on
the victim
table.
there.
Not at all. No. But that's what makes it so sad is that we can't realize that doing the right thing, eventually you're going to get blessed if you do the right thing. That's how I feel. At least that's how I operate.
I mean, if you look at the Central Park Five, even in the documentary, I remember watching and thinking, what's up with the girl? Like, she's completely out of the picture. None of the five guys were completely,
Nobody even asks her. Like, she had no voice in any of it.
Nope.
Right.
I mean, now she has one. It's not great, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm like, if we change the perspective and the focus on, instead of trying to, like, the alleged perpetrators, but let's look at the victim. If you just simply focus on the victim, you'll probably find the actual perpetrator, but we don't do that. We because the job of the police department is to find somebody.
Yeah,
we need to put something in this role of the rapist or whatever, just to fill a quota, just to get it done. Now we look like we did something. Versus it may take longer to do it the right way, to actually look at the victim and then work that way. Let's start at her focus and then work out. They just looked around. Oh, I see some people, and let's try to get them connected to the crime
and make up a story that works
to keep the public under control.
Exactly.
And when the public means scared white people.
Yeah. let's just be honest about that.
Right.
It's just so concerning to me, and I don't know if this will ever change, but how little protection women of color specifically have in these situations. Like, even when you go back to the Harvey Weinstein situation, all these white women came forward, and the minute Lupita said he did something to her too, he was like, I never did that to her.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so the black woman comes forward and you're going to deny it, but all these white women and you don't say anything.
The only two women he denied was Salma Hayek and Lupita Nyong'o.
Women of color.
Wow. The only two. Everyone else, he just like, oh, I apologize, this, that, and the other.
Yeah, it's disgusting, honestly. And it's the same thing with, Tiffany getting fired. There's just no protection around women of color when when we use our voices. But I wonder how much that also goes back to kind of intersectionality within feminism. Because I don't think there are enough white women actually standing up for women of color when these situations happen to let them know, hey, Time's Up and Me Too is for you as well. Even though Me Too was founded by a black woman.
Yes. I think white women will speak for women of color when it becomes a vehicle for their white supremacy. So they're fine going to countries in the global south. They'll go to Kenya and Nigeria and be like, look at your rape culture. You know what I mean? Yeah. And try to make them, even though like the statistics are pretty similar all across. Not to say it's not a big deal in Africa. Of course, it's a big, we don't want women there getting harmed
Right, of
either.
course.
Right.
But statistically, it's not that different, and but yet I think white women will be very vocal to defend non-white women if it's a vehicle for their own white supremacy or a way to be like, oh, our men are better. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like because a lot of their work is just defending bad behavior of white men.
Yeah.
So I think white women will definitely speak up for of non-white victims when it benefits them.
Right.
But when it comes to like action, if it could hurt a white man, the silence is deafening.
Well, yeah,
Interesting.
because like if
Yeah.
I'm trying to get my thing over here, like I'm trying to get my money, but then if I connect your agenda to mine, it slows me down. So why would I do that? Let me get my thing first, and then maybe I'll bring you on in the back end. But like, no, I need to get to my thing. I understand that you want equality and all that, but yeah, but it's like you're women. Like it's all of you. You all have this issue to deal with. Yeah, but if you're white, it is a little easier. So why not reach back and help someone out?
Right. Right.
And I think also like money has such a big part of who gets justice and who doesn't.
For sure.
Because like the white feminist movement in many ways is a capitalist industry. Like Gloria Steinem has this like multi-million-dollar business which she calls feminism. People get mad if I mention her because they're like, she's the queen. I'm like, she's not my queen.
Right.
She's your queen. You could keep Gloria Steinem and you can keep Susan B. Anthony. I'm not interested in either one of them.
Right.
But it's for white feminism is a really big industry, right? Like if you just think about it, like, oh, female CEOs, so now women have to be slaves of the corporate system as well. Like, you know what I mean? It's not
Right.
really freeing us.
Right.
So much of it, and I was in Kenya. I lived in Kenya for 2 years as a part of an NGO, and that's when I really learned. Like I was very innocent and stupid when I went out there. And I never went back because I'm like, I'm gentrifying another country by just existing here. This is stupid. Let me go back to my own country. And they really don't need us there. African people are very educated. We don't need to go there and take their jobs. It's not necessary.
Well, they didn't need to go over there and bring us here in the first place. Because that's another conversation.
Wow.
But for me as an Asian woman over there, like having a good job was ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
why am I here stealing a job from an African woman? That made no sense. Which is like why people are like, why don't you go back? You don't like us? Like I loved it, but I didn't love who I was, what my role was there.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is money. You give people credit. Like I went and I fought this humanitarian issue in Rwanda for 18 years, and then we build these people idols in America. And then and I'm like, but why were you there for 18 years?
Yeah.
You should have been there for like 6 months to a year training somebody if they didn't have the access, and then come home and let Rwandan women do the work. You know what I mean? They'll do it better than Westerners. But for those 18 years, that was an income, and that's what people don't understand. Like so much of the feminist, and I'm a feminist. I'm not knocking feminism, but the quote unquote feminist work out there is an industry. It's a business. NGO workers are all there. They get paid money. Like I never lived rich in America, but when I was there, my American income, which was a small income for America, like went far. I came home with tons of savings. I had a beautiful house. I hired 2 people to clean my house. Like I never mopped the floor in the whole time. You know what I mean? Like you live well. So I think a lot of it is that this is a business, and in the end, victims are never gonna get justice when everything is like running as a business. Am I off topic?
No, you're totally fine. We talk about everything. We just go, no, you're doing good.
So I think like victims are not really gonna get because like if you think about it, you think okay, there were these NGOs in these countries for this many years. We had these nonprofits in America for all these years. Why isn't things changing? Because once you solve the problem, where are you going to get your money from?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's not like you're not like if you solve the issue you went out to solve, or if you've accomplished your mission statement, you're out of a job. And if you think of how big the NGO world is and how many generations of people, it's a family business, And so, and even here, nonprofit work. So I feel like for victims, like, so if just the reason why a lot of victims don't get justice is we live in this global capitalist system where there's always money to be lost as soon as you really do the work, right? Like, like for me, just being in the comedy world, and there's like a whole circle of activist comics, and a lot of them it's very steeped in cancel culture. This person says the wrong thing, cancel them. And sometimes I'm like, okay, this person just moved here from Tennessee. Let's teach them. Yeah. They might not have had the same access, and I don't think we need to. I think we should have standards, but I don't think we need to cancel everybody.
Right.
And then sometimes to a margin, some people are just going to say things I don't like, and there's nothing I can do about it.
For sure.
And then there's another margin where I'm like, yeah, let me talk to this person. Let me give them a chance. But we cancel. But then I would notice that some, particularly male comics, are very bad behavior. The same person who's canceling this, barista from Tennessee over saying the wrong word will allow let that bad behavior from someone slide a billion times if they're connected to television.
Right.
You know, and I'm like, as long as we because entertainment's a business, you know,
Yeah.
and nonprofit work is a business, activism is a business, advocacy is a business. These are all things people get paid to do.
For sure. For
So
sure.
I think as long as our system is so capitalist, this unregulated capitalism that we have, and it's like it's not for the people. We're not distributing wealth. We're not taxing the 1%. You know, as long as we have this system, there's very little we can do outside philosophy for victims. Well, we can do, but there's very little we will do.
Right,
Besides
right,
adapting the right quote unquote correct philosophy for victims.
sure.
So I think like was it in when Haiti had its major earthquake, I think the Red Cross raised some $76 million, and they built 8 houses.
Yeah. Yep.
8
Barely
houses.
any of that money
houses.
went to them.
I'm like, what? Like, what? That boggles my mind. That
Yeah.
we gave them this much money. That country is still poor, right?
100%.
So like,
And they're gonna make sure it stays poor.
exactly because
Because
it's
how are they going to keep raising money for
Exactly.
poor countries if poor countries
aren't poor anymore.
aren't poor
Yeah.
anymore?
Exactly.
We talked about that before.
Right?
It's like if you don't have a purpose anymore, then you can't. It's why they won't cure cancer probably.
Or at least tell us where it's coming from.
Right. Oh man, see, we could talk about a bunch of stuff.
Please.
But before we wrap up, I've noticed that the word feminism kind of gives people a bad taste in their mouth, but it really just means that you are for equal rights for women. So do you think white women have changed the definition of feminism or have given it a bad connotation?
Well, I think yes. And it's not just white women, because I think there's also like within non-white communities, there's also our equivalents of our own white people.
True.
And I
true.
think definitely like privileged women
Okay. Yeah,
have
that's a great way to put it.
without a non-intersectional worldview, or who are actually literally competing because they want to be the white man, you know, and they see it's in reach and they're using feminism as a tool to get there, has given it a really bad reputation. I think exploiting the term feminist or exploiting really well-intentioned people who are joining your movement because they want equality, but you're using them for your platform kind of thing.
Right.
So I think there's a lack of education of what feminism is, and because of that, it's harder to name who's using it and who's sincere.
Yeah.
You know? But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I think privileged women with power and money and a platform that their privilege gives them definitely corrupted the term or people's views of it, because we need feminism to survive.
For sure. Karmel, how can we move forward to hold people accountable? Like when you know that there's sexual assault happening or know that there's issues happening in a situation, how do we hold people accountable?
I think there has to be some sort of standard or a way of, it's kind of weird to say this, but almost championing that person. Like if someone's a whistleblower, the term already is like a negative connotation.
Yeah.
So if we create something that creates a situation where that person is almost like championed, like, oh, they did this, they helped this person out, and give them some, not a reward, but something that makes them feel like, okay, that was cool that I did that. I think that will create people to start thinking, okay, if I do that, I'll be treated that way. 'Cause I think sometimes we see a situation where someone does the right thing, everything is handled and justice is served, but that person is still looked at as a whistleblower, or
Yeah.
they did
They get
something wrong. They
blacklisted.
get blacklisted.
Absolutely.
And so I'm like, there's got to be a way where we change that, because it's not going to happen monetarily. No one's affecting people's money. That's not going to happen. But if we can somehow or another help people who do say something feel better about what they did, I think that changes it.
Awesome.
Yeah, like rewarding people.
Yeah. I think that's great. Well, we're so glad that you joined us. And do you want to tell us a little bit about the comedy album that you have out before we wrap up?
So I am a stand-up comic, and I'm a little less serious. No, actually, I'm still serious. But it's just that I am who I am. But I'm a stand-up comic, and my comedy partner, who's also my boyfriend, Lenny Shelton, we just released a comedy album called Brownie Points.
Nice.
It's on iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you listen to music. You can find it. It's also on CD Baby, available for download as well as streaming, and it's as you can imagine, political and social issues.
Very
But super
cool.
funny too. It's hilarious.
I
so
love it.
please
And
check
where,
it out.
And where can our listeners find you on social media?
You can check me out Instagram, Raja Michael Comedy, on Twitter at Raja Christina. Christina is my middle name. And
Love
you
it.
could, yeah. But I'm more active on Instagram. So please follow me on Instagram and Twitter, whatever you prefer. Yeah, and that's about it.
Wonderful. Well, in typical We Need to Talk fashion, we love to end every episode on a positive note by highlighting a organization, person, or community that we think you should follow that's doing good in the world. So, Karmel, who do we have this week?
This week, we have Foundation for a Slavery-Free World. Their goal is to eradicate all forms of modern-day slavery, whether it's adult or child sex slavery, bondage to debt, slave labor, any of that, any kind of way we're in bondage or slavery in such a way. Their founder is Marisol Nichols. She's a star on the show Riverdale. So actually doing a show with her, an event on October 2nd with Regard Magazine and her foundation.
Oh, awesome.
At, hopefully, I think it's at the Chateau Marmont on October 2nd. So you can find her on slaveryfreeworld.org, also on Twitter at slavery_free.
Very cool. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
And this episode of We Need to Talk is brought to you by Black Root, the darkest, richest, boldest coffee anywhere.